Game on, and it's Scott, and something has happened to my camera, and I'm live, and this is life in the fast. Go, camera on, and this has never happened before, so I'm really thrilled to have. So I'm going to be talking while I try to figure this out on the back end. And that should have been my camera. Freak out. There I am, Scott with Rafters, Sports and Movies. Today we have a special presentation. Hopefully I won't disappear again. And my friend Legend is super, super excited because he's been following him for a long time as well. There's Legend. He's in the house, and he's feeling much better. Interview 2 of this year, which, as you know, my year starts in April. I have with me John McClain. He is a Pro Football Hall of Famer, and that's the NFL Pro Football Hall of Famer. He's also been named the 2015 Gridiron Legend in Texas. 2019, he was inducted into the Texas Sports Hall of Fame. He is also on the Pro Football Hall of Fame Selection Committee and the Pro Football Hall of Fame Seniors Committee and the Texas Sports Hall of Fame Selection Committee. Huge wealth of knowledge with football, Texas football and football. Graduate of Baylor University, Distinguished Alumni. And you may not have known, you saw him in the sports movies, The Rookie, The Longest Yard, Secretariat, Invincible. We have coming to the stage now, John McClain.
Hello, Scott. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for joining me. Let's look at your, this is your banner in my rafters behind me. There you are. In all your
like it. I thought I have a face for radio, so I thought I was going to do the whole podcast on a blank screen. That probably would have been better.
Well, I almost did the whole podcast on a blank screen, so I'm glad I figured that out. Never happened to me before. So let's run through how did you, so you're retired now and you're doing most of what
I'm not retired.
Okay. Not retired.
I retired from the Houston Chronicle after the 22 draft. I do 16 weekly talk shows, podcasts, and TV shows, and I make documentaries with 3 other filmmakers. We're currently at work on our 4th one. The working title is Dante, The Life and Times of Dan Pastorini, quarterback for the Oilers, Raiders, Rams, and Eagles, who has led the most interesting life of any player in any sport I have ever known. And our first one, Love You Bum, it's on Amazon. Our second one, the PVIL story, Separate But Equal, about the All-Black Prairie View Interscholastic League. It went from 1920 to 1970 and was separate from the All-White University Scholastic League. We worked on that for 18 months. We've gotten awards. We've been to Halls of Fame, and it's timeless. And 7 Hall of Famers played in the PVIL. The ones still alive are Joe Green, Ken Houston, and Emmett Thomas. And we have had a blast making that. In fact, Corpus Christi is honoring us because they won the first integrated state championship in 1960, beating Wichita Falls. And their best game was a semifinal victory over Port Arthur Jefferson and a nose guard named Jimmy Johnson. And we went to Jimmy's place in Key Largo, Florida, and spent a day with him and got him in there. So you can find that one at Mad Dog Entertainment.tv, MadDogEntertainment.tv. So that's what I've been working on those with director Mark Burns, executive producer Scott Nethery, producer Rob Lynch, and it's a labor of love. So I only retired from writing.
Well, writing's changed, and now it's all AI or ChatGPT. It's not what it used to be when you started way back when.
Well, I don't know anybody using AI or ChatGPT. If you are a writer for a newspaper and you do that, you will be fired.
Well, newspapers aren't what they used to be, for sure.
That's
and
true.
So how did you get into the business of being, was it always, the goal was always sports, or did you happen into it? How did you get there?
I grew up in Waco. I love sports. My dad, the late Curtis McClain, loved sports. ESPN was a godsend for him. At first, I watched him sometimes when I was up visiting my parents. He had on Australian rules football at 2 a.m. He just couldn't get enough of sports, and that was my first love. I fell in love with 1960 with the Cowboys and the Oilers. That was their first year. The Cowboys were awful. Oilers won a championship in the American Football League, which was wide open. They threw the ball like crazy. Cowboys ran it. NFL ran it. So I fell in love with football, became a big Baylor fan that same year, 1960, when my Cub Scout troop went to Baylor Stadium for the opener. They beat Colorado, and I sold on Baylor. In 1962, I was a big fan of the Houston Colt 45s, still am, still remember the first game, exactly what happened in that game when they beat the Cubs. And so I grew up a diehard sports fan. I was a terrible student. My mother used to say, you can read a sports magazine and remember every statistic, but you can't remember anything that you learned in school. And I said, it's because I don't care about school. And then when I got a job at the Waco Tribune or Herald working for the late, great Dave Campbell in 1973, going into my junior year at Baylor, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a sports writer. Then I came to the Chronicle in 1976 to cover the original Aeros with Gordy Marty and Mark Howe. And I didn't know squat about hockey, but I learned fast. And I tell everybody, learning hockey from Gordy Howe's like learning the Bible from Jesus. And then my first training camp with the Oilers was 1977. So this is my 50th year covering the NFL in Houston.
What was it like when Houston didn't make the jump from WHA hockey to the NHL?
Houston always had a really good team. They won championships in the American Hockey Association, and they had great players, great coach, Bill Nunn, but they had a bad owner. And that owner, George Bolin, missed a paycheck, and that allowed the Howes to be free agents immediately. And they left and went to New England. And Kenneth Schnitzer, the late Kenneth Schnitzer, developed Greenway Plaza and built the Summit. He became the owner, but it was too late. And the NHL didn't want another team in the South because too many teams from the Rust Belt were moving, and it was just bad timing. So they had so many good players that were dispersed and went to other teams. Some became executives. We had a 50-year Aero reunion 2 years ago, and it was incredible. And every year, the Houston Hockey Association, Houston Hockey Hall of Fame has a fundraiser, and Mark and Marty Howe always come back with a bunch of the former Aeros, and they get a lot of kids involved in that weekend, and it is a spectacular weekend. And we're all holding out hope that Dan Friedkin, the Toyota magnate, he wants an NHL team, that he can get one. Because poor old Joe Petita, after he's buying Caesars for $18 billion, he's not going to have any money left for an NHL team.
Well, he's got that WNBA basketball team he's working on also.
So hopefully the Sun will lose every game this year. They've won one, so they can get the top pick and get a superstar in here like Juju Watkins.
Right. I remember the Cheryl Swoops days. It was a golden era of women's basketball, period, let alone for Houston. It was just a shame that it went away, period. So through your Oiler years, you've met some pretty interesting people. And so you mentioned your Dan Pastorini. Did your working with him spar this documentary, or was this just something that's been kind of in the back of your mind all that time?
No, and I had nothing to do with the original idea. Like our Love You Mom documentary, Mark Burns, the director, worked on that for a year and a half, interviewed 40 people, and I came in doing interviews at the end, and then I did interviews for the PVIL, separate but equal, and then I did some interviews for another one we have coming out about high school football in Texas, in a little town in which Bandera, cowboy capital of the world, a little northwest of San Antonio, where they do homecoming like the 50s, bonfire, parade. And we went and interviewed their only state champion team they were honoring. And you would have thought we were Spielberg, coming back there a bunch of times filming. And it was a blast. And then they're always busy because people come to Bandera from all over Europe because they want to be a cowboy. They want to learn to ride and shoot. And you find them from Scandinavia.
From Scandinavia. He'll be right back, guys. Just hang tight. It's just a glitch in the matrix. Not like my problem earlier. That was a different problem. But we'll get John back here in a second. So you just hold tight.
So the Dan Pastorini idea, Scott, came from one of our producers, Rob Lynch. After Bum, we were kicking around the next one. I wanted to do the Southwest Conference. And I said, people are going to forget about the Southwest Conference. And then Rob goes, well, what about the Prairie View Interscholastic League? I said, what about it? And he told me a couple of stories about what they went through. The book Thursday Night Lights was written about them. And I said, where'd you hear those stories? He said, from Joe Green and Kenny Houston. I said, wow, because they're brothers-in-law. And I said, let's get them together and talk to them some more. And we did, and they told us more stories. And then, and so we decided to do the Prairie View Interscholastic League. And so Rob, and we all know Dan Pastorini really well. Dan is involved with us in a lot of charities for the Gridiron Legends of Texas. And people don't know he's a very humble guy for a guy who was so wild and crazy when he played, appeared in Playgirl magazine. The Flak Jack was invented because of Dan. Dated Farrah Fawcett, the most famous actress in the world in the 70s, acted in some movies, finished second to Ted Danson for the role in Cheers. There's all kind of things about Dan people don't know. And at first, he's kind of like, I don't know why anybody want to know about my life. I said, hey, write these stories, and because they're great stories. So it was Rob's idea to do it. We started our initial interviews with Dan. We'll be doing a bunch of them. We're going out to his hometown in Sonora, California, at the base of the Sierra Madre mountains, and then going over to Santa Clara, where he went to college. And we're going to put a lot of time and effort into it because we think that if we do a good job, that a lot of people are going to go, well, I didn't know that about old Dan Pastorini.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a great story. He was always one of my favorite quarterbacks coming up because that was around my teenage years or my elementary. I don't want to date myself too much. But yeah, I definitely remember him playing, and I definitely remember he was gone by the time I was in the Astrodome watching the Oilers, and I was their last season. I want to say, no, it wasn't their last game, but I was in the Astrodome their last season, so I did get to see that.
Well, I'll tell you something right quick, Scott. In 1977, I was sent to my first training camp. And back then, they still had 5 exhibition games, and training camp was 2 months long, and there was a week-long rookie camp. And so I was sent to the training camp at Stephen F. Austin in Nacogdoches. And the main beat writer, Hal Lundgren, he was at a church camp. And so they sent me, and they said, don't come back without an interview with Pastorini. Because Dan liked to ride and drive fast things. At one point, he was the top National Hot Rod Association driver. He liked to drive motorcycles, speedboats, everything. And he was good at it. And he told us in our initial interviews how he got to be such a good driver back when he was driving go-karts in California in the dirt next to the Sierra Madre Mountains. So he had a boat wreck, and he killed 2 people. Now, lawsuits ensued. Turned out, he had lost control, but they were not where they were not supposed to be. But he had not talked to the media since that boat race. And they told me, don't come back without an interview with Pastorini. So I thought, okay, he's not going to want to talk about it. But I went there. I waited about 3 days, went up and introduced myself after practice. And I said, by the way, if you got time some night, I'd like to get an interview with you because you could talk to them after their meetings before curfew. And he stopped and he looked around and he goes, thought he was going to blow me off. He said, meet me in the lobby of the dorm at 9:30. I'll get out of meetings around then. Curfew's at 11 and we'll talk. I said, oh, wow, okay. So I got there at 9:15. Casey was early. He wasn't. I was there at 9:30. He wasn't there. 9:40, I figured he's going to blow me off. And all of a sudden, here he comes around the corner carrying a 6-pack of Budweiser. Said, let's go over here in the corner. And we got in the corner. And he popped two tops on the Bud. I turned on the tape recorder. And Scott, he just wanted to get it off his chest. It wasn't because of me. Anybody could have gotten it. But he was great talking about everything that had happened to him. So I wrote a really long, in-depth story, mostly with his great quotes. We played it up, and one of the editors told me probably 3 or 4 years later, if you hadn't gotten that Pastorini story and done such a good job, you may never have covered the Oilers. And I told Dan that and thanked him, and he didn't even remember the story, period. I said, oh, good, then I can embellish it. And so I told him, I said, I owe covering my 20 years covering the Oilers to you, and you agreeing to do that interview in July of 1977.
So amazing how just a small act of kindness, and he probably didn't even think of it that way, but it was a huge act of kindness for you.
Probably helped that he didn't know me.
Well, yeah.
Another thing about that first camp, Bum Phillips, like back then, training camps were bad places. That Bum had a separate room for his news conference after double-day practices. There was a long table, and Bum had a chair on one end. And so when I came in, all the writers, like Dale Robertson, broadcasters like Bob Allen, Ron Franklin, they were on the other end of the table. And I came in, I said, where's Bum going to be? And they pointed down at that end. So I went down right by Bum. And I'm thinking, I'm going to ask all the questions. I'm going to get the best answers. And I'm going to be here by Bum. I don't know why they're down there, but they're making a mistake. So Bum comes in, goes into his refrigerator, pulls out Budweiser, passes them out to everybody, sits in his chair, starts BSing, answering questions. Then he reaches under the table while he's talking and taking sips of his Bud. Then he leans back in his chair, puts his sweaty, dirty socks that have been through 6 hours of practice on the table, and puts his stinky, dirty feet that had been through 6 hours of practice the whole day right there in front of me. And I held my breath, and I looked at the other end of the table.
They're just laughing.
They were laughing their ass off because I had fallen for it, hook, line, and sinker. Next day, I'm down on the end with the rest of them.
Oh, that's got to be the best hazing story I've ever heard that didn't hurt anybody. You know what I mean? Because most hazing stories have some physical violence involved where somebody loses, gets a broken arm or something of that nature. So I want to go into, so you obviously, the big question I have, how did you get to be John McClain? How did you get to be, because, you've got such an acumen from football in particular, and then you picked up hockey, but you learned it from Gordie Howe, and you obviously know how to listen, but who did you go to? Where did you learn how to learn to be good at what you're continuing to do? Because I said you're retired, and I apologize.
Well, I know. Well, it's okay. People think that all the time. When I tell them I'm still on the radio, really? Where? I didn't know. And so I've never been a great writer. I've never even been a really good writer, and I've known that. So I knew I have to get good stories, and I have to get good angles, and I have to use good quotes. And I have to know how to put the story together. But if it comes with turning a phrase or quick with a quip, that's not me. And so I have 3 people in my life who have helped me get where I am. My head of journalism at Baylor, David McCann, who's 93 and lives here, and I take him to lunch a couple times a month. He still gets around great. And Dave Campbell, founder of Texas Football Magazine, sports editor of the
Legend.
Waco Tribune-Herald for 44 years. What I learned from him, reading him when I was growing up and working for him, and then getting to know him and being a friend with him after I came to the Chronicle in 76. And the other one, Tony Peterson. Tony Peterson worked at the Waco paper. We met in school. He helped me get on at the Waco paper. Then he left and came to the Chronicle, and he helped me get on with the Chronicle. And then when Dick Peebles, the sports editor, had a heart attack and died on his way to the U.S. Open, the Chronicle named Tony sports editor. Tony went on to become managing editor, and he just retired as head of communications at SMU. But Tony got me hired in Waco, got me hired at the Chronicle, and put me on the Oilers. And I'd like to tell him, man, I made you look good with all those good jobs you got after you put me on the Oilers. So those three guys, and I was so happy in 2004 when we had the Super Bowl here, and I bought tickets, and it was the last one, not the one in 2004, Patriots and Falcons. I got the three of them tickets, and I had a friend of mine. I told her, I said, I need you to wait on them hand and foot, make sure they get in their seats. You got the fourth suite, treat them like royalty. And she did, and they were so happy. And so those three guys are my primary mentors. And then I've been fortunate with people like Pastorini doing that story, making me look good. One time I went to Chicago, did interviews with Bill Veeck and George Halas. Bill Veeck, one of the most outrageous owners in baseball history, and George Halas helped found the NFL. I spent hours with them at their stadiums. The Bears, Halas was at his office, and Veeck was at Comiskey Park where the White Sox played because he owned them then. And he told me stories about John Dillinger and Al Capone when he worked for the Cubs while his dad owned the Cubs, and both of them were big fans, and just regaled me with stories for hours and hours. In 1995, I noticed when great Packers receiver Don Hudson died, the last survivor of the original class of the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 63 was Sammy Baugh, Slinging Sammy Baugh. And I knew Sammy was 86, and I knew he lived on his ranch in Rotan out in West Texas. And I knew a guy, Cowboy Bill Lamza Jr., who knew Sam. And I called Cowboy and I said, if the Chronicle pays your way, can you set me up with an interview with Sammy Baugh? He says, yep, but we're going to have to play dominoes with him. I said, you can play dominoes. Uh-oh. So Bill and I we flew to Lubbock, drove down to Rotan, and I spent the night with Sammy Baugh and listened to him and Bill play dominoes and him talk for 9 hours over 2 days. And Slinging Sammy Baugh, his nickname Slinging because of baseball, not football. And the stories about World War II, being in the St. Louis Cardinals minor leagues with the Gas House Gang because he's a great baseball player too. Told me a great story about Pearl Harbor and World War II, and I'm sitting there just mesmerized. And when we got up to leave the next day, he made Cowboy and I peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And while Cowboy was packing them up, I'm standing out on the porch with Sam. And I said, why do you live way out here? Why don't you live in Fort Worth or Sweetwater? Because he drove to Sweetwater 5 times a week to play golf with his friends. And he's standing there on the edge of his porch, and he said, I like to live out here. And he cussed like crazy. And the Chronicle let me run the cuss words. Only time they've ever done it. Because they said it took away from the essence of who Sammy Baugh was. And he said, anytime I got to take a piss, I can come right out on my porch and just take a piss right here. He said, I got to go right now. You want to take one with me? So I took a piss with Sammy Baugh off his porch in Rotan. And you talk about of all the experiences I've had, I'll guarantee.
Oh, no. We're at a pause section again. What a great story. We'll get John back here in a second. It's a glitch in the matrix. It happens sometimes, especially when we got Wi-Fi. but we'll get him back here in a second. So just hang tight. Filling the time. We're talking with John McClain. There you go.
So I've been blessed. I've been blessed in so many ways, traveling the world on the Chronicles dime. I wish the Chronicle would hire me for the Texans' next trip to London, because I had a blast in 2019 on their expense. And I've been to Tokyo, Cowboys and Texans. I've been to Mexico City, Cowboys, Oilers, Raiders, Texans. And it's afforded me a lot of great experiences. My wife, Carol, and I, we've been married 38 years, and she's a big football fan. Thank you. She probably wants condolences. And only problem with her, she grew up in D.C., loves the Redskins, hates the Cowboys. And I grew up loving the Cowboys. Then I came here and got a Cowboy exorcism. And people with the Texans have asked me for decades, new players, why are there so many Cowboy fans in Houston? I said, well, they won 6 Super Bowls. I said, but here's what you got to do. You got to treat them like they're mosquitoes, roaches, humidity, and about crime. Just learn to live with them.
There you go. There you go. Well, they are still America's team, or has that changed to one of the other ones? Like for a while, people were trying to say it was the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, give me a break.
And I'm like, I don't think so. I don't care how many Super Bowls Mahomes wins. That's just not going to happen.
Captain America was Roger Staubach, and Cowboys were America's team. And that nickname was given to them by NFL Films for their annual highlight reel, not invented by Tex Schramm, as a lot of opponents wanted to think. And I hate to say this, Scott, but I think the Cowboys are going to be real good. I think they're going to dethrone Philadelphia and win the NFC East, and then we'll see if they can finally win a playoff game, because they've been few and far between. But I don't think they're a Super Bowl threat, but I do think they're a playoff team.
They definitely surprised me last year. I think it was the Thanksgiving game. I definitely did not expect that. And they did. They won it. They played a very solid game, and they showed lots of glimmers this past season. So, and the pieces and moves they've made, I think, only substantiate that. And Dak's getting stronger every year. So I definitely agree with you. So you heard it here first. John McClain says Cowboys on the rise. It could be their year.
I think they'll win the NFC East. I think they'll come here the 4th game of the weekend, and it'll be like that when Deshaun Watson quarterbacked in 18. See, 20. Let's see, 20. The last time they were here, that was one of the hardest hitting games I've seen, and the Texans beat them. And I think this one with Dak's going to light it up, because their offense is going to be great, and their defense is going to be improved. Can't be much worse. They allowed more points than anybody in the league. I can't wait to see the Texans defense, which I think is on a par with the 2 greatest in Houston history. That would be the Lovely Blue Oilers with 3 Hall of Famers, Robert Brazile, Curly Culp, and Elvin Bethea, who helped them get back-to-back AFC championship games, losing to the eventual Super Bowl champion Steelers. And the other one's the 93 Oilers with Buddy Ryan. They went 12-4. They had a bye in the first round. They hosted Kansas City, and they lost to Joe Montana's last miracle pass. And that defense knocked out 11 starting quarterbacks. The rules were different back then, and you could get away with things. But it got to a point where quarterbacks were taking snaps and falling down, and that defense was great. They had a lot of great players, led by Ray Childress. I did an interview with Ray recently at a benefit, and we talked about the Texans defense compared to that 93 Oilers defense. And I think this one can be right up there with them. They can be game changers.
All right. So let's talk about some of the movies you've done through the years, because that's some of the other things that you've got to do. You got to be in some sports movies, and I'm going to read them off, and then I'm going to let you pick which one you want to talk about. So in case you didn't know, he was in The Rookie, and yes, that's the one with Dennis Quaid. The Longest Yard with Adam Sandler and the great Burt Reynolds. Secretariat and Invincible with Mark Wahlberg. So, John, go.
Did you say Secretariat?
I did.
5 of them. Okay. Well, the ones I had the most fun were with were
We're not the sports ones.
yeah, were there's three non-sports, Make It Rain, but my favorite was with James Franco and Selena Gomez, and it was Spring Breakers, in which I played a judge, and I spent 8 hours in a Bradenton, Florida courtroom with Selena Gomez, Vanessa Hutchins, Valerie Corinne, the wife of their director, and Ashley Benson, who's was at the time on a show on ABC called Pretty Little Liars. So for 8 hours, I had to look at them, and they had been in jail all night, and they're all in their little bikinis. And my first scene, they go action, and I do my lines, and the director goes, cut. He comes up and he says, Judge, you got to look at him to sentence him. And I covered the mic, and I said, but I feel like such a dirty old man. He said, well, if you want this part, you're going to have to feel like a dirty old man. I said, okay. So then I looked at him for 8 hours. And we shot that long because it was James Franco's first appearance. And I thought he was great in that movie. And so we had to shoot every kind of angle of him, not to mention the girls, very little of me. But it was a lot of fun. Just like the other one was Cook County, which I was Uncle J.D. Hanson Mount, who is Christopher, the Strange New Worlds, the Star Trek movie, Strange New Worlds. It's set. He's got William Shatner, a young Captain Kirk, on his spaceship, and they're going places nowhere has ever been. And then Kirk grows up. Anyway, this is their fifth year. And the fifth year, 5 years before that, he was a star in Hell on Wheels, which is one of my all-time favorite westerns. And Anson was the star of Cook County, which was about crystal meth addiction in the Piney Woods. And I was Uncle J.D. I was not a crystal meth addict. But I was a mechanic, even though I don't know how to even change oil. So I had to act. And it was a lot of fun shooting that. I had fun on all of them. I was with Diane Lane. When we did Secretariat, I had a line. I was on the front row of a press conference, and she was with John Malkovich, and she was playing Penny, the owner. And Nestor Serrano, who owned Sham, had finished second in every race to Secretariat. He was kind of giving her a hard time, and he made some kind of boast, and I jumped up and said, Penny, what do you think about that? And before she could answer, John Malkovich grabs her, we're out of here. And I got to go, but Penny, what do you think about that? And then they cut my line. So they had a picture of us, the media that was in there. There was about 5 of us, and the director, Randall Wallace, and Diane Lane. And I made sure to stand next to Diane Lane. She's very short. And so we were given copies of the picture. I took it to Chronicle, had them crop out everybody but Diane and I. And I wrote a column about co-starring with Diane Lane in Secretariat. And we put it on our website. And it was tongue-in-cheek, of course. But it was a lot of fun. The Longest Yard, been in the Longest Yard with all the people they had. We shot, when I got to L.A., I had a woman holding a sign, Mr. McClain, at the airport. So I said, I'm Mr. McClain. Can I carry your bag? No, I got to carry your bag.
How packed did I carry it?
That's my job. So he takes us to her hotel. It's me, Peter King, Adam Schefter, Sam Farmer from the LA Times, Jay Glazer, and Chris Berman. And so we're hanging out in the lobby bar drinking because we don't have a call to be on set till like noon. And I said, where's Berman? They said, well, he flew across country from ESPN. He's got an early call to get on the set. He's asleep. So I went over and woke him up and humiliated him into coming down. So he came down, and of course, everybody in that lobby had to come over and get a picture with him. And I actually felt guilty. So we closed that place down. And the next day, we go on the set to get hair and makeup and everything. And Chris should have been long gone by then. And he was still on there. Turned out they'd given him like 8 more pages of dialogue. Had him
Oh.
come in earlier. And when he was done with his take, he's like, ugh. And I told him, you were a real trooper. You couldn't tell had you been drinking all night when you're doing your lines in The Longest Yard. And we had just a blast on the set. Adam Sandler's a big football fan, actually a sports fan, plays basketball like a fanatic. He has in his contracts, he used to back then, he couldn't play basketball more than a certain amount of time at lunch, because if they were playing and they were almost through, he would insist on finishing the game, and time is money on a movie set. So he had to cut it and get back on the set. And the scenes in The Longest Yard where he is shooting Michael Irvin, that's Adam playing basketball. He's a great shooter. He's a diehard Jets fan. His producer, who produced all his movies, including The Longest Yard remake, Jack Jaraputa, is a diehard Giants fan. Those guys have been best friends since college. And so hanging out with them, they took me one time to Morton's in Beverly Hills, just the three of us. And I wanted to talk to them about movies, and they wanted to talk to me about the Jets and the Giants. So by the time I finished telling them all these stories, we'd been there for 3 hours eating. And I'm like, okay, now nice seeing you. See you tomorrow.
It's your turn, and it never happened. Yeah. So
by the way, he's a great guy. Mark Wahlberg was a great guy on Invincible. And I was doing a talk show on 610. Once a week, they let me do one by myself in the afternoon. So I called the publicist, a friend of mine. I said, I'd like to get Wahlberg on. And they said, well, he's not doing anything but national shows. And I said, well, tell him it's the guy that took care of him at the draft in New York. What happened was that draft in 2006, I was there really early in Radio City Music Hall because I wanted to talk to Vince Young and his mom and his family. And so right when families started to come in, way before fans could come in here, I hear somebody yelling my name. So I look over, see if Vince's family's come in up here, and I look up into Bob Uecker's seats, and it's Mark Wahlberg and the director and the producers, the two young guys that had put me in their movies. I said, what are y'all doing up there? And I said, that's where the NFL put us. I said, stay there. So I went and got another NFL person. He brought him down there. And I showed him how everything was done. And I said, while you're standing here, I could go get the New York Times, Washington Post, Boston Globe, Philadelphia Inquirer, LA Times, and let them come over and talk to you about the movie, and you get a lot of free publicity. And he said, okay. So I went over and brought each one over, and they're like standing there talking to Wahlberg. And I told him, I said, on the movie set, you can't get anywhere near close to him. And he said afterward, man, that was great. You guys don't ask me personal stuff. Don't ask me about my wife, my women, nothing about my life. You just ask me about the movie. That's great. And so he had a blast. So because of that, he agreed to do the interview with me on 610. And he was going through the Hollywood Hills. And he disconnected 3 times from his cell phone. And I thought, he's not calling back. He called back every time. So I'm a big Mark Wahlberg fan.
That Invincible, when people said, you got to watch this, and this was a while back, I'm like, I'm not a Jets fan, but okay. So finally I watch it, and I'm so enthralled in the story. And then it gets to the end, and he's catching the touchdown, and then it's over.
It's all true.
And I'm like, I wanted more of the story. It had gone its course, and that was fine. But I could have gone with another 15, 20 more minutes of the story. I was so into it by that time because, the girlfriend leaving him and all that marital stuff, which is, that can happen to anybody, not just somebody that wants to be a football player.
That was when what he did for Dick Vermeil. And we were in a scene with Dick Vermeil's press conference. And I was on the front row with 4 others. We had about 12 of us there, and they made it look on camera like it was 50. And we were we shot that scene in a press box at Franklin Field, which did not have air conditioning. It was hot as hell. It was in May. And I'm sitting next to Gordon Forbes, sports editor of USA Today. And you have Michael Nouri as Leonard Toews introducing Dick Vermeil, who's played by Greg Kinnear. So we shot a bunch of takes, everybody sweating like crazy. And so Gordon, who was at the original news conference because he covered the Eagles for decades for the Philadelphia Inquirer, is whispering to me about Kinnear. And Kinnear goes, "Excuse me, am I doing something wrong?" I said, "Well, he was at that press conference. This is Gordon Forbes, sports editor of the USA Today. He covered Vermeil." And he goes, "Oh, well, how am I doing?" And Gordon didn't want to say anything. I said, "Tell him the truth. Tell him what you just told me." He goes, "Well, you're very confident. Dick was not. Toews hired Dick. Nobody wanted him. Hired him because they beat Ohio State. UCLA did. So he was nervous when he was up there." So Kinnear's rubbing his chin, and he goes, "Okay, thanks." So they shoot it again, and Kinnear, when Nouri introduces him, gets up kind of slow from his chair, stumbles just a little bit, shifts back and forth while he's talking, clears his throat, does his lines. Cut. How was that? That's it. That's it. That's exactly the way Dick was. And Kinnear was so appreciative about it. And but that was another great experience I've had, basically just because of who I know. Almost everything I've done is because of who I know. That's like why I like to help people, because most people want to help others if you want to be helped. I've known a few jerks that don't like to help people, but I think of all the ones who help me, I'm happy to do anything I can for people.
Well, I'm loving hearing that, and I'm loving hearing the vibe. I'm very much a Ted Lasso vibe. I want to be Ted. I want to be that positive influence on people. I'm hoping the new series is just as good as the last one. And thoroughly enjoyed Greg Kinnear as Dick Vermeil. Now that I look back on it, yeah, I do remember that. I do remember him being a little nervous, a little not so sure of himself. So it was very fun for me to see. I mean, I do think Greg Kinnear is a very, very good actor. And I think Mark Wahlberg, and I did enjoy Mark Wahlberg in the dog movie. What was it? Arthur the King, where they do the running. They're doing the extreme running challenge. That was a good one with him also. Just amazing. Well, John, I don't want to keep you all night, even though I would love to. But do you have any last final things you'd like to?
I'll tell you one other story about Wahlberg. Questions. So I asked producers when they announced that Wahlberg was going to play Vince Papale, because Vince is 6'2". And they say, "You know how hard it is to find guys in Hollywood can run pass routes and catch the ball and look legit?" And they're like, so they made sure to make sure all the other players were not too big. Like Harold Carmichael's 6'8", they made him 6'4". The linemen back then averaged 6'4" and 276, and they were 6'1" or 6'2" and about 250. So Wahlberg was great. And I met Vince Papale. He came here. He had cancer after he left the Eagles. After he was through playing, he was so popular in Philadelphia. The Eagles hired him, put him in their player relations department, and the media loved him. Fans loved him. And one game, Ron Jaworski was really stinking it up at the old vet. And Papale got mad at the way they were booing. And he opens the window in the vet and leans out and starts screaming at the fans to stop booing Jaworski. And he was almost falling out. Two writers had to jump up and grab his knees and keep him from falling on his face into the stands. But he quieted that crowd from booing Jaworski because he was who he was. And he came down here to make a speech in MD Anderson when the movie came out. He is a realtor in I guess he still is, Philadelphia area in New Jersey. But he was a great guy, and he loved the movie, loved everything about it, because they brought his life story to be true. And he got to tell people, Mark Wahlberg played me. All I'd like to do, one more thing, Scott, is tell people our movie company is Mad Dog Entertainment. And the Prairie View Interscholastic League documentary, PVIL story, separate but equal. It's historical. It's fascinating. We got great interviews with people from Jimmy Johnson, Warren Moon, Eric Dickerson, Jacob Green, Johnny Rowland, Joe Green, Kenny Houston, so many in there. It's about politics. It's about race. It's a big, important period about our state's history. And they're honoring us in Corpus Christi because Johnny Rowland, who's just turned 82, led Corpus Christi Miller to the first integrated state championship in 1960 when they beat Wichita Falls. And the best game they played, according to their coach, 98-year-old Pete Regis, he told us that the best team they played was Port Arthur Jefferson and the best player was Jimmy Johnson. And when we called Jimmy about coming to interview him, he said, I can't even remember last week, much less 1960. And then he started thinking, and the memories came flooding back. He said, come on. So the four of us went over to Jimmy Johnson's Big Chill Bar and Grill on the water in Key Largo, Florida, and spent a half day with him. And he was great. So you can find our movie on maddogentertainment.tv, and you can also find a lot of our interviews.
Where else can you find it?
maddogentertainment.tv.
Okay. All right. Mad Dog Entertainment and Mad Dog wow, that's a mouthful.
maddogentertainment.tv.
I'll let you say it. All right, John, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I do have my last segment here is 4 to 5 questions, and we're going to rapid fire this. Favorite sports moment?
Baylor beating Texas, Miracle on the Brazos, 1974. First time they'd beaten Texas in 20 years. First time they won the Southwest Conference in 50 years. And I was doing the Longhorns dressing room after that game, and I thought I would never be able to go to sleep.
And the coach of that game was?
Grant Taft. He beat Darrell Royal, and after the game, Darrell Royal went in the Baylor dressing room and congratulated him. I went home and told my parents, I found the Longhorn with class.
Well, there you go. It happens once a generation, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, next, favorite sports movie. What's your favorite? Sorry, I said this wrong. First sports movie. What's the first sports movie you remember as little John?
Well, the first one that I remember is my all-time favorite was the original Brian song with James Caan and Billy D. Williams playing Brian Piccolo, died of cancer as a rookie with the Bears. And Billy D. Williams playing Gale Sayers. That is still my all-time favorite. And every time I'm at the Hall of Fame and Hall of Fame players start talking about that movie, they still get teary-eyed.
It is such a sad movie. It is. They captured everything. They
movie of the week on ABC.
Yep. Absolutely. Favorite motivational sports movie? What's the sports movie that you watch that just makes you want to run through a wall?
I love The Natural because when I was little, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. I wanted to play center field for the Astros. And watching Robert Redford, who was a really good athlete and spent 6 months hitting, watching Robert Redford hit home runs with his Wonder Boy bat. I've watched that movie so many times, and I close my eyes, put myself in there, and I watch a lot of sports movies, and I watch a lot of them over and over, but I love The Natural.
The Natural tracks, and it's as good the first time as it is the 20th time.
Absolutely, Scotty.
If not better. And you don't see that much because this or that or something, but they kept so good. And the thing I love, and you'll appreciate this, the thing I love the most about that movie is the sound of that ball bouncing around in the outfield bleachers. Just bounce, and it's so iconic, and that's what I want to hear when I hit a home run. I never hit one.
When he hit that home run into the lights, it reminded me of the 1971 All-Star game at Tiger Stadium when Reggie Jackson hit what everybody believes was the hardest home run that would have been the farthest, but it hit the light tower. And I was honored when I worked for Mattress Mac for Gallery Sports, and he sent me to Jim Crane's annual golf tournament in Palm Beach at his club. It was a charity thing for Reggie's foundation. And I interviewed Reggie, and I said, the home run you hit to center field at Yankee Stadium in the World Series and the home run you hit in the All-Star game at Tiger Stadium, which was hit harder? And he said, well, the Yankees was bigger. I said, well, of course, it's the World Series. But he said, I've never hit a ball harder than the All-Star game, and I've never seen anybody else hit one harder either. And I just said, blew me away. If anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, Google Reggie Jackson home run, Tiger Stadium.
It's insane. It's an insane shot. Okay, so the last of my rapid fire questions is favorite sports movie, snack, drink. You're settling down for your favorite sports movie. Maybe you're rewatching The Natural. What are you settling down with?
Well, I never drink beer during movies because I'm a cheap drunk. So I don't want to have anything that's going to keep me from being able to focus on the movie. And my favorite drink is Diet Dr. Pepper. And I like to have it with anything, especially Mexican food, chips and dips. So when I'm watching one of my favorite sports movies, I'm eating Mexican food and drinking Diet Dr. Pepper.
There you go. Originally came from Waco, Texas. So
absolutely, Dr. Pepper Museum. People ought to check it out.
And while you're there, check out the Texas Sports Hall of Fame. John McClain is in this Texas Sports Hall of Fame. It is phenomenal. You'll be glad you went. Right across from beautiful Baylor University. I was fortunate enough the first time I met Mr. McClain was at the gala this year, 2026. Got to see the inductees, and that was phenomenal. I'm hoping I'll be able to go again next year. I'm hoping I'll line up. It was a miracle I could go this year, but they
already have the date, so you got no excuse not to put it on your calendar.
That's true. That's true. Well, John, I'm going to put you in the back room. We're going to close this out. I'll be back with you in a minute. This has been John McClain with us, and here's his banner on there. And this is Scott with Rafters Sports and Movies. Thanks for watching. Give me a like or comment in the channel, in the chat. Put it down below. Appreciate all of you watching. And this is Rafters Sports and Movies.